Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Why We Huddle. Today, we head to the new heart of the Big 12, Orlando, Florida, as we talk to the UCF Knights. Alrighty, and welcome in. This is Roger, aka Knight Bingle from the Knighted Ones podcast. How are you doing this evening, Roger?
Awesome. I'm caffeinated and ready to go. Talk some football. Getting ready for the season.
Oh, for sure. Definitely lots of good things going on, lots to look forward to. And I know it's the second year in the Big 12. So I can't wait to hear what maybe some of our fans from Utah or Arizona State get to learn about UCF today.
Well, we've had a few of them on as far as our fellow brethren when it comes to the College Huddle, and all great people. And I'm excited for them to come to Orlando and experience the bounce house. A lot of folks, it's kind of built up a brand. The tailgating scene's pretty fire. And, the big thing I've been hearing from everybody, from the new folks that are coming in, is they're not used to Southern football. And what I mean by that is packed houses, unlike the Pac-12. Kyle Whittingham's actually gone the extra step where he's pumping in crowd noise to get them used to what it's like to play in the South. So I'm excited to welcome them to, the Big 12 and obviously the bounce house and give them the full experience.
For sure. Yeah, I know Witt had a interesting time coming down to the South to face Florida back in 2022. And I can only imagine he's trying to better prepare this year as he heads down to Orlando for that's the Thanksgiving game, last game of the season, right? Well, Thanksgiving weekend.
Yeah, it's the Black Friday game for the Big 12. So it's going to be, I believe, I can't remember if it's ESPN or ABC, but it's going to be one of those two channels, and it's their feature Black Friday game at 7:00. And we are a little used to that time slot and that exposure, having played the Cows for so long. Notice we did not call them by their directionally challenged name. But it's an exciting time. It'll be a night game. The house will be packed. It'll be rocking. So the Utah fans are in for a good time. That's for sure.
Definitely. And I've told Utah fans, and I'll say it for anyone listening, if you plan to come to Orlando for that game, you want that to be your first stop, because Orlando is busy. One of the busiest weeks of the year is that Thanksgiving week. So definitely have that be the beginning and enjoy the lull that is the week after Thanksgiving, as far as if you're coming to Orlando to enjoy our many attractions. So let's go ahead and get into it with UCF. What can you tell me about the story of UCF, which has really grown up over the last 20 or so years here in Florida?
Yeah, we make a big thing, and many college football fans have kind of seen the Space U story. They see the uni tracker challenges every year and all of that stuff, and it's kind of become a thing. And that has its heart in what the school is. It's a space grant university, which is, you've heard land grant, you've heard other things, but it's a space grant. And what that means is the reason that UCF exists is because of the space program that was going on in the 60s. So UCF was founded in 1963. They were not called UCF at that time. They were FTU. And because they were FTU, they solely focused on providing engineers for the space program out at the Cape. As UCF kind of grew, it became more regional. And so it changed its name to the University of Central Florida as it added colleges and was no longer just engineering focused, although engineering is one of the top programs at UCF. And it kind of grew into a regional status. And John Hitt at the time decided to change the name to the University of Central Florida. And then it kind of grew again, and it just hasn't stopped growing. So now UCF is honestly, there's been thought processes and fans talking about, hey, should we change the name again? Right. But I think it's going to stick because of the branding, and they've built so much around it. But it truly is an international university. So they not only do we have campuses here, there were 10 campuses in Orlando, but they actually had campuses that were overseas as well. So it's a growing university. It's got a lot of students. When I went there, we were talking about that. I went there and started in 1999. It had about 27,000 students, and it's just grown exponentially to the point where it's one of the largest universities, but also one that still sticks to its roots as far as the foundation in tech. One of the things that people don't know is the university, as far as research is concerned, it's one of the top producers of patents in the US. So we've always done a lot of research. The approach was, hey, we got to build buildings for all these students because we're growing. So they went to the Lockheed Martins of the world and everybody else and said, hey, in lieu of paying us research dollars, why don't you build us buildings? So if anybody looks at our endowment, it's not necessarily reflective of the amount of research that we actually do, and that's kind of pivoted lately. But UCF in general, it started as a university to produce engineers for the space program, and specifically the Apollo program out at the Cape, kind of grew into a regional entity as it added colleges, and now it's a full-fledged major university.
Yep. And the football program joined FBS in 1996, correct?
Correct. Yeah, they are. I think there's another one other school that joined recently into FBS that has been in all three. UCF started football in the 70s, in the late 70s, 79 to be specific, and they started in Division III. So one of the only schools in all of FBS that actually played at all three levels. So a lot of schools, that are older, Florida, for example, they've played in the SEC or some equivalent of that conference since the inception of their football program, whereas UCF started in Division III. Actually, kind of a funny story. The program was saved with the help of Burt Reynolds, who was a FSU football player. He actually provided us with the original Arabian Horse, did a lot of fundraising for the program to keep it around when it was in a little financial trouble early on. And Bobby Bowden, actually, we affectionately call them Free Shoes U as a little moniker that we have for FSU, because they provided us shoes and socks for the football program when it was in its infancy. So it's quite an interesting story. It's always been one of having a chip on your shoulder and doing less with more. But they went from Division III to Division II, went and played in the playoff for that. We were highly ranked in Division II, then jumped up to FBS. Were independent initially. We wanted to, the idea was, hey, we want to be in the SEC. So they thought the best path to that was being independent. Went from independence to the MAC, was in the MAC for a few seasons, then went to Conference USA. There was when the Cows got called up to the Big East, there was a big back and forth whether it was going to be us or them. They ended up getting the nod. Then we ended up joining the Big East. We were there for the last year of the Big East before that was right as West Virginia and some of the other schools were leaving. And so it then became the AAC. Lost its the reason we played in the Fiesta Bowl, actually kind of funny story, in 2013 was because the Big East at that time was still considered a BCS auto qualifier,
or Power
right?
6, I guess, at the time.
Yeah, well, they called it like a BCS automatic qualifier or whatever. So we were the last representative for the Big East that got to do that. And that year, actually, we were under sanctions, believe it or not. And George O'Leary fought the sanctions. He pushed Dr. Hitt to fight the sanctions, and they actually won against the sanctions from the NCAA. Otherwise, we would have had a bowl ban for that year, would have never played. So we went from the AAC and then got to join the Big 12. And it's been a long journey. It's interesting when we talk about dynamics today. UCF fans we're used to realignment because we've moved conferences pretty much once every 8 years. But the goal has always been to get into a power conference. And, at this point, we've been able to do that. So I know people know about the 2017 season and the Natty Championship, quote unquote claim. And I'll say quote unquote claim because it is in the record books as a championship, a shared championship with Alabama. But at that time, people thought about why UCF's fan base is such an upstart. Why do they on Twitter? Why are they blasting everybody on Twitter? Why are they so vocal? And it's because they've always had a chip on their shoulder because we've had to stand out above everybody else to get to where we are. You think about the SMUs of the world. Memphis at one time was really good. ECU was really good. We had to get the last lifeboat out. And we did when we joined the Big 12. So hopefully that explains a little bit why UCF fans can be very standoffish and dug in when it comes to social media. It's because we've been looked down upon, told, I don't know how many times, join a better conference. It's like, you don't just get to choose, right? But that's where that comes from, that chip on the shoulder. And so you've got a very active fan base. You've got a very young fan base. Average age of alumni is 37. 98% of alumni are still living, and they're growing at about 15,000 new alumni per year. So it's a very quickly growing fan base, a little over 300,000 to 400,000. I think it's like 350 or so living alum and growing 15,000 per year. So it's a young group. I've been to Ohio State and watched a game there. I've been to the Michigan and watched a game there. When you go to a UCF football game, people are they're a good mix, but mostly younger folks. So you're going to hear a lot of vocal people. They're going to be standing. They're going to be jumping around. So it's really, really that energy or that vibe that you feel is translated into the bounce house. So it makes for a great time.
So speaking of the bounce house, I know you touched on a little, but give us a little more details. What is a game day like in the bounce house?
Wow. Okay. So game day for UCF starts in the pregame. We are in the South, and this as a Florida fan, and I've been to some Florida tailgates as well. I will be at the Florida tailgate when we play this year. But in the South, it's just different. Depending on when the game time is, more often than not, when you look at the stadium, there's parking that's around the stadium. Some of that's actually moving for the new tower that we've got going in. But there's a softball stadium pretty close because we have an athletic village. The place is packed. You're going to have a lot of activity there. You'll have the memory mall where all the students tend to tailgate. And it's a very large space. You actually have to reserve your space on the memory mall to have a tent there or to rent a tent there. But the parking is absolutely insane. We have my tailgate group. We have a converted school bus that has a keg in it. It's got a kegerator in it. It's got refrigeration in it. It's got an AC, couches. We've got sprinklers that go on like a mister on the outside because it gets hot, TV that comes out, and RVs. So a lot of people stay there overnight pregame. And, it's just a whole heck of a lot of fun. And then when you go from the tailgating scene, then you bring that energy inside of the bounce house. And when you first go in, there's constantly upgrades are constantly being done. The reason it got the name was when we opened our stadium against Texas in 2007. That was our first game. Was a great game. We were winning up until a storm, and a storm blew through, and Texas kind of caught itself. And Mac Brown actually said, "I will never play UCF again." to open, and he said that, and he meant it. So throughout the years, they actually canceled the return trip as part of that series. We were supposed to go there, and then they were going to come back to our house again, and we had another one. They canceled it because of that. But it's very energetic. It's very loud. At that time, they've added bracing since then, but it was all aluminum pretty much seating.
Yep.
So what that meant was when people were jumping up and down, the stadium flexed and moved, and that's where the bounce house comes from. It's still today. If you go to a game, don't worry, it's fine. It's still going to flex. Zombie Nation is something that we've kind of adopted as our own. A lot of other schools are doing that now too. But basically, before kickoffs, throughout the game, Zombie Nation will play. The energy goes up. Everybody stands up and they're bouncing. So it gets really, really raucous in there, and there's a lot of energy. We have recently installed, like, not this past season. This past season was the first year with our updated lights. So we've got the multicolor lights that you see on TV that can change all the different hues with the light shows. So now those are playing in between. They were getting the kinks worked out last year. But you know, they've got the energy going with the music. It's never dull music. You got lights going all the time. You've got the cell phone thing that we kind of started with, the up down thing with the lights. And we actually had a light show that you could download into your phone that went with the music. So there's a lot of energy. They just, for those of you that imbibe, the entire stadium now, you can buy alcoholic beverages. Before it was just to the club areas. The club and the tower itself is actually being expanded. There's a $90 million new tower going in along with a bunch of other stuff. But from a game day experience perspective, expect to have fun, expect to have a lot of energy. There'll be a lot of tailgating. People typically are pretty good. Any football game you go to, there might be a few drunks out there that get a little too rowdy. But by and large, people are pretty welcoming. And, you know, when you're in the game, it's going to be energy all the time. So if you like sitting down and watching the game, you're not going to have fun because most people stand. So don't get mad if people are standing. They're standing, they're jumping, they're screaming. And the way the bowl is and the angle that it is, all of that crowd noise actually goes towards the field. So it can get really, really, really loud in there, more so than what you would expect with a 44,000 person stadium. Our stadium before was larger. They put some more club areas in, took some seating away. But you know, as far as game day experience, it's raucous, it's loud, it's energetic, it's fun. You know, everybody that I've talked to that it's ever been has had a good time. And, you know, watch one of our games. If you watch on TV, you see the tower, even the tower moves. So the cameras will move. A lot of times they'll do a shot of like a glass with water in it or a cup with water in it that they've set on the step, and you'll see it doing this. Before the players come out, the doors are literally shaking on the inside because where their locker room is for the game day locker room. And it's just a really, really good time, high energy, and have fun. It's a young group, and they love to have fun.
Awesome. And I know you've already talked about some traditions like Zombie Nation, but are there any other particular traditions during game days at UCF, like inside the stadium?
Yeah, there's stuff outside the stadium too. There's inside that we've got a mini horse named Knugget that also goes along with. We do have a rider that's is a knight that rides in before the band comes out and all of that. And then we have a mini horse that's called Knugget that with a KN that runs around with the rider, and then they leave. You've got the up down of the lights show. So like they'll say up, down, and you'll see, and then they'll play some music and everybody jumps up and down with the lights. They'll turn the lights off and all you'll see is the lights from the phone. So make sure you participate in that. Something that the only place we don't do it is, and the only time I've seen us not do it is when we played at Navy. Is when the national anthem is being sung, that we say nights instead of night. So you'll hear the whole stadium yell Knights. So that's something that's tradition. We have a food called the Citronaut, which harkens back to one of our older mascots. And basically what that is, and believe it or not, it's really good, especially on hot days, is it's Fanta. And then they take an orange creamsicle ice cream and put it in there, and it melts in there. And it's pretty good. And then, there's certain things that go along with songs that pretty much everybody has, but those are the big things. Is just, be aware that we're going to say Knights. Don't be upset or taken aback that we, say something during that. Before kickoff, you'll see everybody jump up and down. Any kickoff that we have will jump up and down. They'll play Zombie Nation, and they'll yell UCF as it's being kicked. And then, basically it's just the game day experience. And then the team will come and sing with the student section, which the student section is interesting because on our stadium, it's large and it's on both sides of the stadium. So when opposing teams come to the stadium, they're playing into, they're driving into the student section on the left, or they're driving into the student section on the right. And then the last thing I'll say is when SpaceX decides to play along, don't be surprised. We get night launches all the time from the stadium. So when you're playing at night, our 50-yard line is actually lined up with the launch pads out at the Cape, 39A to be specific. And SpaceX now, they used to launch the shuttle from there, but SpaceX now launches the Dragon. So they'll take a second to watch the game, and you can actually watch the rocket take off, and it's a beautiful sight.
Awesome. And one last question I have about things. Tell me about your special space uniform game.
Okay. Yeah, so we have the space game, and it started in football, but now it's all of the teams where they have a space themed uniform. They're usually what they call canaveral blue, which is a color that they took. They actually went out to Cocoa Beach, and where the Kennedy Space Center is, and got a meter reading for what the color was of the water, and that's the canaveral blue that you'll see. They're alternate unis for football one time a year. They do a big unveiling for the week leading up to it, and they're all themed. So like one year we had a lunar theme, so they did hand painted. And if you haven't checked out those helmets, like besides college football, go check out those helmets where they did a moon theme on it. They did a space shuttle theme one year. And on the space shuttle, they took all the people that were engineers at NASA that worked on the space shuttle program and put it on the helmet. So yeah, they take that color, they put it in there. They do a different theme every year. It's hotly contested. Purdue is now trying to say that they are Space U because they've produced the most number of astronauts. But we are the original Space U. Houston's kind of gotten into it. They try to create a rivalry game with Houston, the Big 12 has, and that's kind of fizzled because, quite frankly, the important part of rivalry games is meaningful games, and Houston just hasn't been good. But it kind of would tie in when you think about the controllers are all in Houston. And the people who actually launched the things are all at Kennedy Space Center. So there is a little bit of real rivalry there. So as far as Space U is concerned, it's one of those things that the uniforms themselves are reflective of who we are. They're unique every year. They come out with a custom design every year. They've got their own letters. They work with letters. They usually have some sort of reflective element to them. They are black, and they've done one black and white set, but typically black and blue, or last year I think they did pretty much all blue, but they'll be different every year, and it's cool to check out.
Awesome. So before we move on to your story, if you could describe the culture of UCF in one word, what would that be?
Challengers. Everything that we do at UCF is upward trajectory. We like to say upwards in our flight, and we put our fingers in the air during the school song. We've moved conferences every 8 years. So whether it's from the academic side or whether it's from the athletic side, it's a challenger brand. It's built to be challengers. It's built to be in your face. Not quite like Miami was back in the 90s and early 2000s, but it's a challenger brand. They are striving for success consistently. The fan base wears that on its sleeve. The football team does as well. So from a cultural perspective, it's it's a very passionate fan base. It's one that is constantly looking, and the athletic program too is constantly looking to do things differently to separate ourselves from everybody else. Whether that be, the social media team that has won awards and awards and awards over the years, the video team, same way, or whether it be, creating new traditions. So you talk about traditions, a lot of programs that are 100 years old, they're carrying over, traditions that are 70, 80 years old. And that's kind of part of the DNA of the program. We're still creating them. But a lot of these traditions have kind of stuck and will continue to stick. So it's new, it's energetic, it's young, it's fervent, it's, and we've got a chip on our shoulder, and we want to make a name for ourselves and be taken seriously and relevant in college football. There's been a lot of hard work that's been put into that.
Awesome. So let's go ahead and move into your story. Tell us how you became a fan of the UCF Knights.
Yeah, so I actually was born in another country. I was born in Germany. My mom's German. My dad was a soldier, and he retired from the military in 1998. So showing my age, other than my gray hair and my beard. We retired to Orlando because at the time there was a military base here, and a lot of people who were in the military retired here, and moved here. And actually, when I first got here, when we first literally drove to the state of Florida, because my parents had picked out a house, they got me a University of Florida t-shirt. So I wore it a few times, didn't really get into college football. I played football. Actually had a scholarship to offer via appointment to Army to go play for the other Knights, the True Golden Knights. So I was a big football fan. I was a lot bigger than I am now, and also played semi-pro basketball. So I was big into sports, but I didn't have a team because I was new to Florida and new to the United States, to be frank. So back in that time, that 97, 98 time frame, there was somebody on campus by the name of Dante Culpepper. And so Dante Culpepper went on to do great things in the NFL, was actually a UF commit for a long time. And then there were some grade problems. And basically the only reason UCF got him was because the coaching staff said they would work with him through his academic challenges. So he came to UCF, and I watched games there because there was a lot of buzz about him at the time. And I was deciding where I wanted to go to school out of high school because I wanted to be an engineer. My undergrad is in aerospace. So aerospace engineering and UCF kind of go together. It's literally founded for that. I got into UF, got into FSU, but I decided to stay home and because of the close ties to the space program. And so I started watching with Dante and got hooked ever since. And then when I got on campus, just stayed a UCF fan, and then graduated, and then went back a little bit later in 2011 to go get my master's degree, which was a totally different experience than it was in 99. But the program finally started kind of getting its footing and winning the meaningful games. And what I mean by that was the Liberty Bowl was in 2010, where we beat Georgia, and that was our first major bowl game. Then you had in 2013, you had the Fiesta Bowl, and everything that was happening there. Then you had the transition to Scott Frost. And so I kind of stuck with it. My kids grew up with it. My significant other at the time was also a UCF grad. And so I got to make a lot of memories with my kids. And that's kind of made us a UCF family, and it's stuck. And for me, that transitioned into being on a podcast, UCF's first podcast. We very, very successful. It also spawned a broadcast or a podcast channel and an ESPN radio show. So I was doing an ESPN radio show for a couple of years, 2.5 years post COVID. It kind of put a damper on things, and then kept doing that show. And my partner, after I think it was 11, 12 years of doing the show, decided to hang up his headphones, and we just decided to start a new one, which is the Knighted Ones. It's UCF's a part of my life. I love the experiences that I made, memories that I made, both with my kids and friends, and your tailgate buddies. You have tailgate friends that you go to, and you see them every year, and it's a way to catch up. And UCF has given us some great moments and some bad moments. The 2015 season, for one, which I'm sure people won't let us forget. But it's also given us 2017 and 2018, and I'm excited to make new memories as we now progress through a quote unquote real conference and a real conference schedule. So we'll see how we do.
Yeah, definitely lots of room for growth. So in your time watching UCF and being a fan, who would you say is your favorite player?
Ooh, that's rough. One of the advantages of being a quote unquote smaller program is you have more access to players than you normally would. And especially during the George O'Leary years, he put a premium of meeting each one of the players, right? So every year we would do Fan Fest, and we would go meet with the players. So you kind of watch them grow up. And now it's a little different, right? You've got the transfer portal. We've got 40 new players on our roster this year versus last year. A lot of them are juniors and seniors, so you don't develop those connections. If we're talking about from a performance standpoint and just overall brand ambassador, Mackenzie Milton by far was just the most electric, exciting guy. Blake Bortles was right there too. Mackenzie Milton was this kid that you could see progress and was just magic with the ball in his hands. It was extremely sad when he went through what he went through against the Cows. And then there was that whole journey with Mackenzie Milton as he recovered, right? He almost lost his leg. People don't realize that. The family embraced UCF. There was that whole connection there. And I think for someone who kind of encapsulates what UCF is, where our trajectory is, I think he's my favorite player from that standpoint. But there's a lot of great players and a lot of great people. We had Terrence Plummer on, who was from the Fiesta Bowl years on recently, and he's my favorite linebacker. I played linebacker, so you couldn't tell now because I don't look like a linebacker now, but my frame's 5'11", and I was about 200 pounds coming out of high school, and he was just that hard-nosed, smash-mouth player. And these quote unquote diamond mining, the 2 stars that turned into great players that went on to the NFL. So have lots of great players that I could name there, but Mackenzie Milton for me is probably my favorite to watch. You never knew how he was going to get out of the jam. The arm angles he threw, I imagine it's a lot like Kansas City fans these days for the Chiefs, in that the arm angles, the things that he did on the field, it was fun to watch, and he amazed you. And it was just, you never knew what you were going to get, but it was always good.
And what would you say is your favorite game for UCF?
Ooh, the favorite one has to be the last Cows game, right? I mean, where Hughes ran back the touchdown when we were going back and forth. We were ranked. That was the 2017 season. The Cows actually had one of the best teams they've ever had at that time. And one of us was going to go and win the AAC that year and go on to play in the bowl game. And so that game went back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. It was rated as one of the highest games, most watched games, and best games in college football in the past decade. And at the end of it, the Cows had scored, and Mike Hughes ran back a kickoff return to win the game. And, put us ahead. We actually won when their tight end dropped or fumbled a pass, and we jumped on it after we hit him after he caught it. But that game was just electric from start to finish. Rivalry games are rivalry games. I don't know how much longer the Cows will be a rival for us. I think it really depends on if they pick up their game or not. But they are our longest rivals. And that game, you got a rivalry game. It's for all the marbles. It's to go to a major bowl game, which both programs, we'd only been to one previous New Year's Six game before that. They had never been. So the air was electric. It was by far my favorite game because it laid everything on the line, but there were so many other good ones. I mean, there was a BYU game that we played, BYU or back in the day. And Terrence Plummer was one of them. He had 14 tackles as a linebacker that evening. It's just smash mouth football. So, so many good games, but that's by far my favorite. Go back and watch it, or at least the condensed version if you can. They have like these 10-minute clips where they take all of the commercials out and stuff and have the major plays. But that game is, still ranked top 10 over the last 10 years as far as college football games. So if you love college football, go watch that game.
Yep. I remember watching that one for sure. Florida didn't have much going well in 2017, so we have plenty of time to watch some of these other games. But all right, let's go ahead and talk about the Knighted Ones podcast. How'd you get the name? And I think you talked about why you started it, but if you just want to clarify that at the same time, that'd be great too.
Absolutely. So the Knighted Ones was born out of Nightline, which was the original podcast that we had. Obviously, I wasn't tired of it yet. I love doing it. I love hanging out, and more so not just for being on a podcast, but hanging out and having a reason to talk football with some really great guys. We have a unique group. Two of the members of the podcast were part of the podcast at some point at Nightline. One is a former football player, Trey Neal, who was on that 2017 team that we were just referencing. And the other one was a basketball player that played for us, who's a 7-footer who makes me look really, really small whenever I'm next to him. He played in 2004, where we made one of our earlier NCAA runs. We've got those two guys, and then we've got two newer guys. One, Alan Levin, who has a pretty big Instagram following, and Josh Lazar, who's actually a professor and is a little bit older than me, although he doesn't like to admit it, and has a lot of that historical context. So you've got the progression of UCF football and the perspectives of fandom over that entire group. So it's a really good group of people. We try to be funny. Yes, you're going to get a lot of good information. Yes, during football season and basketball season, you're going to get some very specific analysis as to what people were trying to do, why they were doing the things that they were doing, what the strategy was behind what we're doing. A lot of people that are, couch football fans don't understand what they're, even if a play breaks down, what were they trying to do and why. So you'll get some of that. But you also get a lot of fun. We have, we have our hair flip at the beginning of the beginning of each show. We do, we have what we call the B button, which basically means when someone says something kind of questionable. We're a clean show. We're E for everyone, not E for explicit. But whenever you hear somebody say something that could be, if you had your gutter helmet on, could be taken the wrong way. We always do that. But it's just a good group of guys. We're talking about college football, specifically UCF, and how the changes in college football affect UCF and college football in general. Got good perspectives from actual players, both recent and past. And so I think we've got a good mix of guys that like to have fun. We joke around, we make fun of each other, but at the same time, when you want to learn something, or if you want a good opinion or a real discussion about a different topic that affects either college football or UCF, I feel like we provide a pretty good place for you to kind of stay a while. So the Knighted One's name, honestly, since we did the first podcast, there's probably now 13 or 14 different podcasts that are out there for UCF. We love our podcasting. But the Knighted Ones comes from a combination of obviously UCF Knights, but the tradition of knighting somebody, which UCF quote unquote does. I think it's kind of hokey when we get a new coach and they get knighted and all that stuff. But also, the ones, meaning like, hey, you're the first string players, you're the starters, meaning the ones. So that's kind of where the genesis of that was, because we had players on that started and all of that. And we were the first podcast. So, the predecessor was. So the Knighted Ones, that's kind of where it came into fruition. And, it's been a great ride. We're growing it again. A lot of people are reconnecting. Older fans that were fans of ours in, Nightline years are kind of migrating over. And we're hoping to put out some great content that people like to enjoy. And so far, it seems like we're doing a fairly good job with that.
Awesome. Sounds good. So where would listeners be able to find you and be able to check you out?
Everywhere. So we do both we do video content, and we strip the audio there and we put it on the normal, any platform really that you can think of, whether it be SoundCloud or whether it be Spreaker or Spotify or Apple, anywhere where you can find podcasts, you can find us. On YouTube, you can find us under the Knighted Ones. We obviously participate and create content for the College Huddle, which we love the fact that we're part of the College Huddle. Met some very, very good people, and it also allows us to participate in larger conversations outside of just the UCF niche. You can find us on Instagram at the Knighted Ones, X on the Knighted Ones. I'm still getting used to not saying Twitter for that. But X, Instagram, and then any of the broadcast channels.
Awesome. If you had anything to say to any potential listeners right now, what would it be?
If you want a good mix of having fun where you can learn something, follow us, listen. We do take our feedback seriously, so we do incorporate what you say into the show. So make sure you're communicating with us. Make sure you're following up with us. Make sure you're interacting with us. We love our listeners. We've got the humor. We've got the dad jokes. We've got real humor, not just dad jokes. And we have a good time while we give you good information and talk about UCF things. So if you're interested in us or just learning about different things, all of our podcasts also have obviously the title, but you've also got all of the subheadings and with the time markers. So if there's a particular topic that you're interested in, you can find that as well and just listen there. But be a part of it, have fun. Tell us when we're going sideways, and go Knights.
Definitely. With that said, thank you for joining us. It's been a lot of fun for me. Hopefully you've had a good time as well. Definitely learned a lot about UCF. Thank you for joining.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. And I'm sure we'll do some more content together. Everybody, obviously it's a UF guy and a UCF guy, but still I think we have a lot of fun and talk college football. And, in this day and age of college football realignment and all of that stuff, that's a part that people need to think about too, is not just the conferences you're in, but what it's doing to the sport, because we wouldn't have things like this or opportunities like this or memories like this without it. And lastly, I just kind of want to leave it with this. I really, and I want everybody who's listening right now to put pressure on Daniel. I want to get a big three really, but big four podcast together so we can talk some Florida sports. So if you're a Florida sports fan, get a FSU guy, UCF guy, Florida guy, and I don't know if the invitation to Miami gets lost in the mail or not.
Well, no one is part of College Huddle yet, so we'll see. All righty. With that said, everyone, thank you for listening, and thank you for discovering why we huddle.